Hi guys, hope you're all well. We are going to do a little watercolour workshop today. It's not going to be a very long one, so we're going to do several of these watercolour tutorials as requested, and we're going to start with, we're going to look at merging colours, so creating a really nice combination of colours. We're going to look at colour bleeding and how to stop it. We're going to look at different types of brush strokes, and we're going to look at edge texture. So let's get started. All you're going to need is some thick paper. So I use cartridge paper or watercolour paper. Now watercolour paper is quite pricey, so if you can get hold of yourself some thick cartridge paper, that's fine. So that's what I'm going to be using here for a demonstration today. And we're going to need some watercolours. So a couple of years ago I got massively into my watercolours, so I bought myself a really nice set of lots and lots of different colours. We're going to need a range of different brushes. Again, use what you've got. I prefer really tiny brushes or really big brushes, but there is whatever you've got in the house, let's have a go at using. So let's have a look at merging colours first. I always tend to have, next to my pot of water, I also have pieces of kitchen roll. Now you can use loo roll, but it leaves lots of little bits, but this is really good for getting rid of the excess moisture off your brush. So we're going to have a go at merging some colours first. So I'm going to get quite a fat brush. So let's use that one. Let's use that one. So what I want to do is I want to just use water. So no paint on my brush at all. And we're just going to be going on to your paper. Oh, look at that lovely rainbow from my conservatory with some puddles of water. So wherever the water is, that's where the colour will bleed. Wherever is dry, the colour will not. So once I've done that, I'm going to go into my colours and I'm going to choose red first. Now I'm going to go into my colours. You can't really see that bit, can you? So I'm going to go into the red, and then I'm going to dab some of the excess moisture off the brush. So there's lots of nice pigment on that. So when I go in to the area with all the water, the colour starts to move around and bleed and do loads of really cool stuff. So I'm going to put a few dabs here and there, and then I'm going to completely wash my brush out, get rid of all the red, and then dab it dry on the paper towel. And then I'm going to go in with another colour, and I'm going to have a bit of purple. I love red and purple. And then again, we're going to dab in some of the pigment into the wet area, and you can just dab and you can kind of watch where the colour bleeds and moves to. Now, play around with this. Sometimes you can have your paper too wet, and it creates like lots of puddles, and then you have to wait ages for it to dry. But it does create some really nice effects, and all the colours kind of bleed into each other. Now, if I leave that and I don't mix it with my brush, you'll still be able to see the pigments of the purple and the red, and then you'll be able to see where the colours cross over. So I'm going to do one last colour, and I'm going to use a little bit of blue. And the areas where the white is showing, I'm going to go in and add. If the colour doesn't bleed, just dab a tiny bit more water on the end of your brush. And then I'm going to go into these little areas here. So this bit here is really wet, so the colours are going to merge together loads. You don't want the colours to mix too much, because if you're not careful, you will just end up with brown. And unless that's what you're going for, brown's not really one of my favourite colours, so I tend to try and avoid that. So that is a really nice way of getting your colours to merge. So if you are left with a bit of a puddled area, you can tear a little piece off your kitchen roll, you can dab at it, and the water will be automatically sucked up into the kitchen roll. So you can take out some of the excess moisture with little bits of kitchen roll, and then you can go back in afterwards with a little bit more colour. So you don't want your brushes again to be too wet. but you want it to be, the area to be wet enough that the colour starts to bleed. So I'm going in here with a bit more red. So I'm going to move my pot of water so you can see what I'm doing with my water. I'm adding a tiny, tiny bit of water to the end of the brush, then some more paint, and then I'm going in like this. And then that just brings out the red again. Just dabbing and then it'll bleed. And then I'm going to wash my brush out again, so there's no colour left in it. And I'm going to just have a tiny, some brush is really just a little bit damp, not wet. And I'm going to go in with some more purple, just define these areas of purple as well. And then you'll notice they'll start to bleed again together. So you can keep doing this and add in. And if you add too much, you can take it away using a little bit of kitchen roll. You can also, if you've got a lot of water, stab some more water in there. You can get your colours to bleed in drips, which is quite nice. She says. So just add a bit more water, and then if you tip your piece of paper, it'll start to bleed and drip. So you can create some really nice backgrounds using this type of technique. And the best thing to do to learn about watercolours is just to experiment with them. So there's a quick technique for watercolours and the merging colours. Now we're going to look at colour bleeding. So I'm just going to do a really quick outline. I love painting flowers and I love painting watercolour flowers as well. So I'm not even going to define the entire outline. I'm going to do a little really rough petals. So I've got a really rough outline of a flower there. Another tip for when you're using watercolours, change your water frequently. And that always helps. So now I'm going to go with a really tiny brush, really thin, small brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the edges of my petals. So I'm going to wet the brush, and then I'm going to go in to, I'll use a bit of purple again because I love a bit of purple. And you want lots and lots of paint on the end of your brush, so there's lots of watercolour paint on the end of the brush. And then I'm going to go round with a line of purple. So a nice thick line with lots of colour. You can continue this all the way round. You could just do a little bit. And then I'm going to wash my brush out completely so there's no pigment on the brush at all. And I'm just going to use water from now on. I'm going to get some water on my brush, and I'm going to use it to go into the edges, and I'm going to do it in circles. So if you do that again like this in circles, you'll see the colour will start to fade outwards from the edge. So it'll make the edge really nice and dark, and it'll take the pigment out and it'll blend it. So doing it in circles means that there's no sharp edges. And then as you can see it colour blends from a really lovely dark purple to a not so dark. And you can add it again, so wash your brush out again, get some more water on there, and then go in again and you can fade it even more. So you can actually fade from colour to white using this technique. Really simple, straightforward, and it works beautifully when you're painting flowers. I've painted lots of flowers with using this technique. If you end up bleeding too much out, say on this bit here, so oh no, you've used too much of the edge purple, just get a fairly dry brush and some more purple and go back into the edge. Paint the edge again. Now you don't want to do this with a wet brush because it will bleed into it, so you want to do with a fairly dry brush and the purple. And then we're going to do exactly the same. We're going to wash all the colour pigment out of your brush, and then we're going to go back in and we're going to use little circles to bring the colour down. Tiny bit more water. The more you try this technique, the more you'll get to grips with how much water you need, which is always another reason why I always tend to have a little piece of kitchen roll to dab any excess water off. So as you can see, we've gone round with the purple there. So I'm just going to finish this leaf using this technique. So tiny bit of water and some purple, and I'm going to carry round the edge of my petal like that, and then I'm going to wash all the colour again out, and then I'm going to go in with circular movements and I'm going to bring the colour down. Okay, so I've used a little bit too much water there, so I'm going to dab on my brush just to get rid of some of it. Dab my brush on the kitchen roll. Keep moving, keep moving. Now if you let the watercolour dry, you have to work quite quickly using this technique, because if you let the watercolour dry too much, it's hard to get rid of the edge that you've created. So you have to work quite quickly. I'm going to wash my brush again, and I'm just going to go with water, and I'm going to blend this down. Blend, 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 blend in little circles. Adding more water as I need it, and bringing the paint down as I need it, just like that. So we've got a really nice outline edge of a flower. And then I'm going to go in just around the other edge, and I'm going to go with a kind of a dark rosy pink colour. And then I'm going to do this bit here. You see that there? It's a bit too watery, so we need lots more paint on the brush there. So I'm going to add some more paint, no more water. And I'm going to go in and I'm just going to do this outline edge here. It goes up to the purple. And I'm going to keep adding, because I don't think that that's quite dark enough for the edge yet. Keep adding paint. If we don't put enough paint on, it's going to be really hard to bleed it outwards. So there we go. Then I'm going to wash my brush out again, go just in with water, and I'm going to go circular movements, bringing the colour upwards. This is a really relaxing activity to do. If you're feeling stressed out, get some watercolours on the go. They always help me to relax. So we're going to bring the colour up to meet the purple. So there's a really nice quick demonstration of how to blend two colours together, how to create a nice defined outline and then merge the colours into one. So we've done that. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit now about different types of brush strokes, and for that I'm going to choose a kind of smallish brush. So if you're using this type of brush, try using it with, so where you're dabbing some of the excess water off before you go into your colour, and that'll give you a really nice strong colour. So different types of brush strokes you can use a really light touch with lots of thin brush strokes, kind of, you could do like a bit of a crosshatch type thing, and you can build up colour like this. So the brush is actually quite dry for this, and the more you go across each line, the darker the colour will get. So I'm dabbing some of the excess water off onto the kitchen roll before I'm going in again, and then I get a bit more of a defined line. So as my brush gets wetter, you'll be able to see, or I hope you can see, the change in appearance of the brush strokes. So these look really kind of rough and sketchy, and these look really nice and fluid. So you can do little type brush strokes like that. You can go in with a different type of brush. So I've got some square brushes as well here. So I'm going to wet my square brush, and I'm going to choose some orange. And orange, you can experiment with different types of brushes if you've got them, because it creates lots of different types of brush strokes. So you can go in quite dry so you can see the actual fibres of the brush, or if you go in a little bit wetter with the paint, it creates a nice line. You can add a little bit more water where you need it. As the pigment starts to fade, that always looks quite nice. You can also turn your brush so it takes it to a point. So keep it flat, and then as you move in, you turn it and it takes it to a really nice point. There's all sorts you can do. We could do, let's do some green, and I'll do some little swirls, so swirly type shapes with your brush. These are really good when you're doing foliage and trees and leaves. You can do some really nice swirls, and you can add lots of different strengths of green in there. Keep dabbing, and I'm going to change my colour green now, so I'm going to go in with a darker green, and then that gives it, there we go, so little dabs of green. Do it in different directions, so you capture like types of, like a movement type feel for your greenery, trees, leaves, anything like that. Another technique that you can use is you can actually use your piece of kitchen roll, or you can use a dry brush. So I'm going to show you how to do this next, and I'm going to get a different piece of paper. So I really want that one. It's a different piece of paper. So I'm going to get a dry brush, and I'm going to get a little square dry brush like this. And then I'm going to go in with a bigger brush and some colour. So I'm going to choose a darker colour so you'll be able to see it easier. So just using a darker colour to go on. So you can do side to side, you can do up and down, you can add darker areas. If you go in with a dry brush, when that's all nice and wet, you should be able to take away the paint. So you could do like a house. If you were doing like a landscape and there were some houses that were really bright, you can take away. Now what's starting to happen now is there's too much pigment on my brush, so I'm going to have to get a different dry brush, and I'm going to go in again. I don't think that was wet enough, you know. Let's try that again. I think the colour needs to be quite wet for this, so let's pop a bit more pigment in there. And then we'll go in with this angled dry brush, and I'm going to go in, and it's not going to let me do it now. Take it away. Using a piece of kitchen roll. Looks easier, doesn't it? And you can actually create colours, areas of white within your colour by doing that. You have to work really quickly because you need to do it while the paint is really wet. So another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you where's my page gone? Got a lovely book here assisting me. I'm going to talk a little bit about bleeding colours. So if you want to do what I did in the very first bit, where you bleed the colours together, that's great. If you don't want colours to bleed, so the thing you've got to remember with watercolours is wherever your page is wet, the colours will bleed. Wherever your page is dry, the colours won't. So if you start, like with the flower, with your darkest colour on the edge, and then blend it backwards, the colours are not going to bleed. So the best thing to do with watercolours is take your time, be patient. Sometimes you will have to wait for your work to dry before you can go again in with a different colour. So if you're wanting to have two colours very close together but you don't want them to bleed and you want kind of a straightish line, you're going to have to paint one side first, then wait for it to dry completely and then go in with the other. Otherwise, if the two things are wet, they will bleed together. So always remember that's a really good tip. And last but not least, we're going to look at edge texture. If I can find the right. So let's just do really quick, get a brush, really quick tree. So I'm going in with a fairly dry brush, quite a lot of paint, and I'm going to do a tree. A tiny bit more water to that because it's not coming out very well. So I'm going to do a shape of a tree. All the little edges I'm doing with a tiny fine brush so I can get in that kind of foliage edge, that textured edge. If you wanted to do a tree that had edges that were a bit more blendy, you'd use more water. So I'm going to go in now with a little bit more water and make those edges softer. And that is really good for when you're painting things in the distance. So if you're looking for, you're painting trees, but they are on a landscape picture and they are in the distance, if you blur those edges, it gives the impression that your tree is actually a lot further away. So I'm actually going to go in with a different colour, it's not a different colour, I'm just going to go with a darker green, just to add a little bit of contrast in there, and you can just dab that in, move it about, add a little bit more water, move it about, and if you want to you can define your edges again, or you can use more water and go in with just a wet brush and you can blur those edges. So totally up to you. Have a play about with it, see how it goes. Do me some paintings and post them so I can see what you're doing. I know that a lot of people that come to Artbox on a Thursday enjoy doing watercolours, so have a play around and show me your watercolour paintings, and I will hopefully see you all soon. Bye!